Hello, welcome in everybody. Welcome to the Soul Group Live. Hello, Temple Time. Good to see you again, my friend. Hope life has been treating you well. Hello, Tweety. Ayana, welcome back. Hello, Arlena. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm doing well, Temple Time. Thank you. So, I've got some stuff going on tonight, and I'm not going to be live for the full amount of time. This will be a little bit shorter than what it usually is, and I've got some important stuff to talk about, so I want to go ahead and get started. Good evening, Peter. Good to see you, my friend. I want to continue like a part 2 to the conversation that we were having on the last live about think for yourself, question authority, manipulation, fact checking, that sort of thing, and the importance of that, especially the importance of engaging spiritual discernment. Hey, Tony. That's the bulk of what I want to talk about, and also I've had several people reach out to me on the topic of spiritual protections, since that was one of the main topics that we discussed on the last live. So again, I won't be on here the full amount of time. Those are the two primary things that I want to try to discuss with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in there first. Those of you that was wanting information, you wanted me to speak about spiritual protections and along those lines, bear with me. Hang in there. I do want to discuss that, but first I want to talk about, I want to wrap up the conversation that we were having whenever my live got shut down, whenever I was talking about thinking for yourself, questioning authority, critical thinking, and all of the multiple sources of manipulation in our modern world. The reason for that is because I've been seeing several things spreading like wildfire through the internet, and I want to personally not give you my thoughts on what you should believe, but I want to talk about a couple of special topics that have been going around the internet in a way that I think should be addressed, which involves engaging critical thinking, vetting sources, trying to get at a nugget of truth, that kind of thing. Thank you for that, Angela. Okay, so we covered far too much ground on that live for me to back up and recap all of that. But in a nutshell, I cited a few psychological studies. Peter, remind me when I get done with this spiel. Remind me on that topic, and I'll talk about that, okay? Thank you, Honeybee. On the last live, I mentioned a few different studies, not recent studies, in the 60s and 70s that were done in mainstream psychology that were all geared towards basically trying to understand how in the world the vast majority of the population could be so easily manipulated. And those studies were very eye-opening, and I think that everybody should know about these studies because they basically pinpointed the reasoning behind the ease of manipulation of our consciousness, but more importantly, the authority factoring into that equation. Just as a brief example, without going back into all of this, was the shock experiments that were done in this study. They found that in the testing, that those who had no idea that this apparatus in front of them was fake and it wasn't actually inducing electrical shocks, they would induce an electrical shock to another participant beyond the threshold of severe pain, even to the point of perhaps even killing them, as long as there was a person standing over them in a white lab coat saying, well, they answered the question incorrectly, so you need to administer the shock. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, please go and look into that. This is huge information to understand. But basically what that study proved is that the vast majority of the population would be willing to do something that is a huge step over their own moral boundaries that normally they think that they wouldn't cross, as long as there is an authority figure standing over them. Yes, the Stanford experiment. That was another one that was huge. The authority figure was the key. They did several variations of this study, such as the doctor still being there but taking off the white lab coat made a huge difference. It dropped something like 30%. The clipboard was another thing. Any of the tools or artifacts that convey authority, the more of those the person had, the more likely they were to administer a fatal shock. The less of them that were present, the less likely they were, which they basically use this to rationalize how so many people went along with, as an example, the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. Because for those of us who weren't there, that seems completely unconscionable. Like, there's just absolutely no way I personally would ever do anything like that. Of course, we all want to think that, right? Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate that. Nobody wants to believe that about themselves. But the truth of the matter is, if we're not ever put in a situation like that, we don't ever truly know how we would respond. But they wound up singling out the authority figure as the main culprit and what enabled these people to go beyond what they normally would do towards inflicting harm or even death on another person, because they felt that the responsibility, the personal responsibility, was shifted on to the authority figure as long as they were present. The main reason I'm talking about this is because that appeal to authority is everywhere, all around us. This is not an obscure notion within psychology. This is something that is well understood. As an example, mega corporations have psychologists on their payroll that spend millions of dollars figuring out how to utilize tactics such as this. This is the same reason why police officers wear a uniform, why they have a badge, why they have all of the things on their utility belt. Sure, they have utility, right? They serve a purpose. Hi, Deborah. Good to see you, my friend. But more importantly, they convey authority. That means you should do what I say because I am an authority figure. You should not question me. What I say is the law. Exactly, Arlena. That is how cults start. In fact, I have a book. Always have a book, right? It's called The True Believer by Eric Hoffer, which was a psychologist, and he dedicated his career to understanding mass movements and how they function, how they begin, how a mass movement develops, how a cult is formed, and what holds it together. Authority figures in there very, very strongly. But it is the same thing in all walks of life. This isn't just, it's not just with doctors. It's not just with, law enforcement officers. With almost every type of career that there is out there, there is a whole tier of artifacts, tools of the trade that are meant to convey certain significance psychologically, to convey a level of authority. Yeah, I agree with that, Michelle, for sure. Politicians, are absolutely one of the worst whenever it comes to an appeal to authority. But the main reason why I'm mentioning this to you guys today is that I hope every single one of you guys know this, and I'm sure that you do. Religion and spirituality is not immune to this appeal to authority. In fact, it's probably more susceptible than other areas of life, especially in religion, but also in spirituality. Any figure who has risen through the ranks and has achieved a certain degree of popularity or success in spirituality, especially those who present themselves as having all of the answers and knowing the truth, that is an appeal to authority. And that, in my opinion, can be a very dangerous thing. And that's why I'm always, you guys, I don't know how many lives I've ever not said, think for yourself, question authority. But my guess is it's probably not very many. I try to mention that and discuss this on each and every single live because this is so incredibly important. The more, for me, this is my personal belief. Thank you for sharing that, Benita. Hello, Anna. Good to see you, my friend. For me personally, the stronger an appeal to authority that I'm presented with, the more I feel compelled to question them, to question that authority, to question what they're telling me. The reason is, the way that dynamic works is, if somebody is making an appeal to authority, they are basically saying, don't question what I'm saying. I am an authority figure. You are meant to accept what I'm saying blindly without question. That is a very dangerous thing, right? And that is one of the main problems that's wrong with our world today. A really good example of that is, I've had hundreds of debates in here. It's one of the things that I love to do on the Soul Group. Not because I think that I'm always right, because I know I'm not. I'm wrong a lot. That's one of the beautiful things about being a human being. But I have a learner mindset, which means if I believe something and I believe it falsely, I would be grateful if you show me the error of my ways and lead me to the truth, even if it is something I've believed my entire life. If it's wrong, if it's incorrect, if it's a logical fallacy, I want to be corrected on that. So for as long as I've been doing these lives, I've welcomed debate openly, whether it's a topic I'm discussing, my own personal belief, or some of the information I'm sharing, whatever. It's always up for debate, and I never try to present anything as absolute truth for that reason. But several times I've been talking about something. Let's just make something up, pull it out of the air. Let's say we're talking about psychology, right? And let's just say I'm talking about how easy it is to manipulate human beings, and that 90% of people aren't really capable of critical thinking. And then an individual comes onto the live and says, I have a PhD in psychology and you're dead wrong. Why would they say I have a PhD in psychology? That is an appeal to authority. That is saying you should not question what I'm saying, and I obviously know exactly what I'm talking about and know more than you because I have a piece of paper with my name on it, without knowing anything about my knowledge or my background or experience. That to me is a huge red flag. And again, I think this applies in all areas of life. Cheryl, I'm going to talk about that. Don't let me forget. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because there are plenty of people out there right now on all forms of media, including social media platforms, who are authority figures. And if we accept them as an authority figure, the way that is meant to be accepted, that means whenever they speak something, it is meant to be accepted as truth, without question. That to me is always a red flag, unless they are up there saying, this is what I think or what I believe to be the truth, but you need to find your own truth. That's something entirely different than this is the truth, right? So many great questions. People who run around claiming to know more than experts are my red flag. I actually have a degree in psychology, and you just proved my point. But thank you so much for saying that. My point is, if you don't know anything about me whatsoever, saying I have a PhD in psychology, therefore I know more than you, that's a dangerous assumption. If you don't know anything about my background, my education, or my experience level, right? It's an appeal to authority. And anybody can say, I have a PhD in psychology. That's the problem. That doesn't mean that you actually have a PhD. And even if you do, that just shows me the degree to which you've been exposed to the indoctrination system. There's a big difference between education and indoctrination. That's my point. I have no problem with people trying to become educated. I try to push that as much as possible. My personal motto is think for yourself, question authority. There's authorities everywhere, right? It's unavoidable. But what I'm trying to say is we should be aware of that connection between a perceived authority figure and accepting blindly what they say as the truth. Well, thank you for stopping in, Chad. I appreciate you. At the moment, we're talking about critical thinking. So, anyway, all of that aside, the main reason that I'm mentioning this to everybody is that I do believe that there is a serious problem in mainstream Western society, especially because of the ease of access of information. It is a very sharp, double-edged sword. We have access to information readily available at our fingertips 24/7, 365. In many cases, you can find out what's happening in some obscure province in China before the citizens of that village that are there have the ability to find out about it. Just like that, because of the internet. And the internet has given everybody a voice, which is a beautiful thing, but it's also a potentially hazardous thing because anybody can post anything on the internet. So sure, we have immediate access to mountains of data and information, but it's not vetted information. It's not meticulously cataloged. It's not been analyzed. The sources haven't been properly vetted. So if you're trying to actually get at the truth of a thing, you have to sift through a mountain of potentially misinformation, misleading information, or absolute garbage to be able to find the actual truth. And the amount of effort and work that it takes to get to that nugget of truth is exhausting. It's overwhelming, and the vast majority of people don't have the time, the energy, or the bandwidth to sift through mountains of information. So what happens? We tend to depend and rely on figures of authority to give us that truth, because we've got lives. Most of us work. Even if you're retired and you don't work, we have lives. We have a lot of stuff going on, right? There's a ton of things every day that we have to dedicate our time and our energy to. Very few people have the bandwidth and the energy to meticulously comb through mountains of information and sort through it, and figure out what actually is the truth. That's why people turn on the news. That's why people also listen to other creators on social media, and that's why people lean on authority figures within the spirituality community, which is why I'm talking to you guys about this. Because in my personal opinion, any attempt at critical thinking, true critical thinking in this day and age without engaging your spiritual discernment or intuition is not going to be very fruitful. 30 years ago, yes. 40 years ago, yes. I think you'd have a lot better luck with it, because the volume and velocity of that information was greatly reduced from what it is today. Whenever you're hit with this new, I did say spiritual, whenever, like today, you're hit with a little burst of very important information, and you start digging into it, you want to get to the bottom of it. So you look at all sources from all angles, and then you start, vetting their citations, their sources of information, combing through, history and that kind of thing. Way before you ever get to that negative truth, you've already got 100 other things thrown in your face that may even be more important than that thing. And that's by design, because by bombarding us constantly with all manner of information and things, we're going to miss a lot. And again, we don't have the ability to sift through all of that. So it is inevitable that we will have to rely on, at some point, authority figures for information. And that's not a bad thing. I think we should have to rely on authority figures, like doctors, like physicists, like mathematicians, people who have dedicated their entire career furthering a field of knowledge, right? But it is also critically important that we're able to trust those sources of information. And I don't think, unfortunately, that is always the case, that we can always trust authority figures. That's why I say spiritual discernment. That's where that comes into play. Because we don't have the capacity to analyze every single little bit of data. Supercomputers don't have that bandwidth, if they are reliable. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I'm going to bring up one point to hammer this home for you guys, to share this information with you. Now remember, my personal motto is think for yourself, question authority. That does not mean take what this stranger on the internet says and run with it and espouse it as the absolute universal truth, right? I share stuff with you guys to trigger you to go out and investigate and come to your own conclusions. And the other thing is, for anybody who does not know me or is not familiar with me, I am not political. I do not believe in our two-party political system. I'm neither Democrat nor Republican. My own personal belief is that it is the left wing and the right wing that are attached to the same bird. And I know that upsets and offends a lot of people, but that is my own personal opinion. I call it analysis, not spiritual intuition. I can get behind that. What I mean by spiritual intuition is not deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, coming from within. That's what I mean by that. Most people are familiar with spiritual discernment or intuition, but I think all human beings have the capacity for deductive, using logic, and inductive, using intuition. And I think both are equally important when it comes to arriving at a conclusion when using critical thinking. Exactly. trusting the gut. Okay, so with that long-winded introduction, here's the information I want to share with you guys. And this is in no way a ploy or a call to sway anybody either way politically, because I am not political. I don't like either candidate, and I'm not Republican. I'm not Democrat. Okay, I'm just sharing information here. A couple of weeks ago, actually a few weeks ago, there were some reports of several members of the FBI resigning. And at first, that was public information, but it wasn't really clear the reason behind it. And a few of them went on some popular podcasts, and they said they could not divulge exactly why, but they implied it was because of the congressional hearings that are ongoing right now involving January 6th a few years ago. Whenever Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building and some people were hurt, and it was a coup attempt. That's the official story. The congressional hearings investigating that, trying to get to the bottom of it, revealed that the FBI was somehow involved in that. That's what they implied. And they were so disgusted with what had been revealed that they resigned. I watched some of these congressional hearings, and the director for the FBI, under oath in these congressional hearings, testified that yes, the FBI was involved, but could not disclose how many field agents were active participants in storming the Capitol building, or how many people were reimbursed for travel from all across the country to travel to that area to participate in this staged coup attempt to storm the Capitol building. He could confirm that the FBI was involved in that, but he said he could not, by their own internal rules, divulge any information until the investigation was concluded. I'm getting to that part. On the staged part. They basically said, we can't tell you any of the details or specifics yet until our investigation's over. So the congressman said, okay, how much longer? It's been 4 years almost. You've had more than enough time to get to the bottom of this. What's going on? And he said, well, we're going to get it done as soon as we can here in a couple months. And he said, so you're telling me that you're not going to release any of the specifics of this until after the election? And he said, that is correct. We will not release any specifics or details about this until after the election. But it is our hope to have it released to the public before the inauguration. So, if you guys have not heard this before, first of all, I strongly encourage you guys to go and research this on your own. Look at the information that is available and form your own conclusions about it. As to why the FBI, under oath, during a congressional hearing, would say, yes, we know this. We were involved in this. We had field agents on the payroll storming the Capitol building, pretending to be protesters. But we're going to keep this private and secret until after the election. Why they would want to do that. And mind you, if you go and you watch the replay of this on C-SPAN or any of the major news media outlets that report the congressional hearings, they're available on YouTube. They're available from their own websites on the internet. You'll notice that they all have a legal disclaimer attached to them that says January 6th was whenever Trump supporters stormed the Capitol during an attempted coup of our government in an attempt to overthrow our government. Giving the official narrative, even as the director of the FBI is testifying before Congress, that this essentially, maybe not completely was orchestrated by the FBI. We don't know yet, but we do know, because they've testified this, that they were involved in it. and again, I am apolitical, right? I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I think our entire system is flawed from the floor up, the entire thing. I do not support or endorse either one of these candidates. The problem that I see here, and the main reason that I'm mentioning this, is that, first of all, we have a two-party political system, and there is a gross misrepresentation of the population by mainstream media. It's not equally, both sides are not equally displayed. If you were to look at, let's just say, higher education, do you know the percentage of college professors that are Democrat versus the percentage that are Republican? If you've never seen that, I'm not even going to tell you. I want you to go look at that by yourself. Same thing with the mainstream media. That's why the official narrative is that this was all orchestrated by right-wing nut jobs, right? If the overrepresentation was the other way, then it would read very different. And I'm not saying that this evil system of control is all on one side. If you guys were here on my last live, you probably heard me say both parties are involved in spreading misinformation and trying everything they can to manipulate and control the population, all to get your vote. That's all they care about, right? They just want to rise to power. And I know that that can be hard for some people to believe, to accept. But that's the truth of it. That's what a politician is. A politician is somebody who is skilled in the art of manipulation. That's essentially all they do. And I know that not every single politician is nefarious or that they are evil, and I'm not trying to imply that. But if you watch carefully with an open mind, just about any politician will say one thing in this city and then go to a completely different city and say something different because it's a different demographic. It's not that they changed their mind, it's that they're saying what they think you want to hear in order to get their vote. That's really all it boils down to. Arlena, I agree with you 120%. It has gone too far. It's crossed every line and every boundary that there was. I don't even want to go down that path talking about all of the many ways that we have been betrayed by our own government, because it is a very, very long list. But it's a very dark and negative road. And that's not what I'm about, right? The only reason I'm sharing this information to you guys is because it's not mainstream. They're not broadcasting it on mainstream media. They might eventually, but it'll be after the election is over. And I think this is important information if you are an American citizen and you plan on voting in the next presidential election, because the mainstream official narrative is this guy, and even worse, everyone who supports him is a nut job, and they tried to overthrow the government because he lost an election fairly, right? That's the official narrative, even though there's proof, there's evidence now that that's not necessarily what happened. So again, I really hope you guys dig into this for yourself and form your own conclusions. I can tell you what my conclusion is. It's that I don't trust anything that any politician says. I definitely do not trust the mainstream narrative about anything. I just do not. It is a mass propaganda machine, and they are very skilled in the art of manipulating the consciousness of the population. That's what they do. Polytricks, yeah. Both parties are very corrupt, in my opinion. The election, yeah. Anytime I say that word election, it pops right up there on the live. Will I run? No, I don't have a death wish. I don't want to be suicided, okay? Just a little inside joke. But no, I would not run for president. I would not. And it might make me a little bit of a cynic, but I honestly believe if we had the absolute perfect candidate for presidency, the best that is possible, I don't think they would have a chance in the world at truly enacting change in our country, because I believe our entire system is inherently flawed. We have allowed money into politics. We have allowed mega corporations, lobbyists, and all sorts. We've allowed money to control policy. That's a serious problem. And well, even beyond that, the very foundations of our system of government and society are founded on the principle that greed is the highest moral of a civilization. That's not equitable, it's not fair, and it is not sustainable. We cannot exist forever based on a system that rewards greed. The greedier a person is in this system, the more they are rewarded. It is incentivized, right? It's subsidized. So I don't know what you could possibly do to fix that. You can try to legislate it all you want to, but at the end of the day, we incentivize people being greedy and stepping on the backs of other people to get a higher advantage point. So I think the system needs to be replaced. That's my own personal opinion. And I think that eventually will happen when enough people wake up to the reality. What do you think should control policy? Okay, I will give you my opinion on this. For those of you, there's several people in here who've seeing me now for the first time. So I want to make something very clear. I rarely, very, very rarely tread on this topic of politics. I avoid it for a reason, because I think the entire system of politics is designed to breed divisiveness, to split the population, to separate us, because it weakens us. It makes us easier to control, and it distracts us and keeps us bickering back and forth with one another, believing that our neighbor is our enemy, which is obviously not the truth, right? My own personal opinion is we do not need a system of government where we elect officials to represent us by holding a popularity contest, where those participants are rewarded by catering to our every whim, not by speaking their truth, not by saying, well, this is going to suck, but this is what needs to happen, but by saying, this is what you want to hear, so this is what I'm going to say. You see the problem with that? But that's what we do. We hold elections, which is basically a popularity contest based on incentivizing whoever is capable of lying the most, and not just lying the most, but being the more successful at it, making it believable, right? We don't need representatives, in my opinion. We have the technology today to where every adult-aged American citizen could vote on the major issues instantaneously with the flick of a button. Every single U.S. citizen. Of course, you can't force every U.S. citizen to participate in it, but those that care, guess what? They would. They would vote on the major issues that were important to them. So why do we need to represent or elect representatives to go and make decisions for us and trust that they're going to act on our behalf whenever they have billionaire oil tycoons slipping them, $10-20 million under the table and saying, this is how I would like to vote. And then trusting that they're going to look out for your best interest, right? How much money are you giving them? That's a pretty inherently flawed system. Direct democracy is possible, which means we, the people, vote on all of the issues. It's a very simple process. We have the internet. We have computer technology. This is not 1776 where it takes 3 months to travel by horse and carriage across the state, right? We don't need to send delegates. We don't need to send and elect representatives. We can represent ourselves through direct democracy. That's my own personal opinion. But if you go back and you look at the environment that our Constitution spring up out of, and you read the writings of our founding fathers, especially the Federalist Papers, it will become glaringly obvious to you that the founding fathers designed our system of government in such a way as to protect the minority. And by that I don't mean women, I don't mean immigrants or disenfranchised. By the minority, I mean the few incredibly educated, very wealthy, elite members of society. It was designed to protect them from the will of we the people, of the majority. That's not my own words. That's one of the founding fathers who wrote the Federalist Papers, and several others, by the way. They designed it so that the few ruling elite class would always get what they wanted, and they would have more authority in the system of government than the common person. And to me, that's a problem. Okay, I'm going to quit talking for a moment, catch up on my comments. I got too far behind. I agree with you. There's a huge difference between money and greed, and I do not confuse the two. Even criminalized homelessness. Yeah, it is now officially illegal to be homeless in California. It could be deemed wrong to watch this live even. Yeah, this very easily could be misconstrued as domestic. I'm not even going to finish saying a word. I'm just going to stop talking there. Thank you for that, Raw. Thank you for being here, my friend. Any election elected is just the fall guy. Rachel, I agree with that completely. It causes triangulation and divide. It's very narcissistic. It is. It rewards narcissism. Sorry, guys. I've got too many comments to respond to everybody. I apologize. I'm going to have to skim through some of these and catch up with you. I'm glad you stuck around too, my friend. If Masked Singer can do it, it can be done that way. I like that. So what would happen if no one voted for either party? A lot of people would need a change of pants, is what would happen. Or they would report the results of the election and be like, a record turnout, 170 million people voted. Yeah, he just said that. Good knowing you. Say hi to the FBI guys for me. They're not here yet, are they? Iona, I don't... I understand the sentiment, but do not despair, my friend. This might be our current reality. I believe it is. But it is not the future reality. This is one of the many systems that are falling away, right? This is one of the many systems of control that have been in place for a very long time. And those things will no longer rule the world on the other side of the end of the cycle, moving out of the old age and into the new age. That is my humble opinion on it. We no longer will need things, systems of control, systems that tell us how to think, or worse, what to think. Well, thank you for that, Keith. I usually try to tread lightly. And again, the reason, it's not that I don't like politics. I am incredibly passionate about politics, and I think it's incredibly important. Okay, so don't mistake that. But I choose to stay away from politics on this live because it is pulling me out of my genre, out of my primary topic, which is spirituality. But it's very important. And there is a spiritual significance of all of this. But again, politics is inherently divisive, and my message is one of unity, not division, not separation. It is that we are all one, and that we only realize that through uniting, right? Not by separating us further and further with more misinformation and distraction and manipulation, and that's never going to work. That's never the answer, right? I agree with you, Nina, 100%. Definitely not cool. I do not support that. I think it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, to try to legislate out of existence homelessness. What are they going to do? I mean, do the politicians in California believe that people are homeless because that's what they want? Because they choose that lifestyle? Is that the rationale there? Did they ever stop and consider maybe they're sleeping on the street because they don't have any other choice? It's a really sad thing. And I agree with you 100%. I really do see politics falling away. What do I think about the 2 moons, Texas Sunbee? A whole lot of nothing is what I think. I don't think we have 2 moons. I think that we had a small heavenly body, which does happen quite frequently, pass between the orbit of the moon and our planet for a brief period of time, and they said we have 2 moons. And if you have a strong enough telescope, you can actually see it. But no, I don't think that we actually have 2 moons. Hello, Aaron. Welcome back, my friend. We are all one paycheck away from being homeless. That is the unfortunate reality for the vast majority of Americans. And that's only gotten tremendously worse in the last few years. I'm going way off topic here, but for anybody who does not know this, I want to share another nugget of information with you. And please go do your own research on this. Don't just accept it because I said it. Who remembers the 2007-2008 housing crisis, the collapse of the housing market in the United States? Most of us remember that, right? All of us probably know somebody who lost everything. People who invested everything into their house and then had to file for bankruptcy. People lost their jobs. People were reduced to squalor. People who had invested everything they ever made in their entire life into their house. Maybe you bought a house for, say, $200,000 and you paid on it for 5 or 10 years, and then the banks force you to, redo your mortgage contract, and suddenly you have $400,000 for the house. All kinds of things happen. There's a common misconception that during that collapse that everybody lost money, but it has been proven that collapse of the housing market was the largest transfer of wealth in human history. It didn't go away. The money didn't disappear. It went from the hands of the masses, from we the people, to the very tippy top, to less than 1% of the population. It created over 200 billionaires. It was insane. Literally the largest transfer of wealth in human history. But that wasn't the official narrative. What we heard was Everybody lost out. Everybody lost all kinds of stuff. That's why I think it's important to be able to think critically and question authority and be aware of those things. Those things are happening right now. That's why everybody's struggling to make it right now. Inflation has run amok. If you listen to the mainstream news, inflation's the lowest it's been in decades. No, it's not. A dollar today is worth 3 pennies compared to a dollar of 1918. 3 pennies on the dollar. 3 pennies. We make way more an hour now than what they did in 1918 or even 1960 or 1970. But if you adjust for that rate of inflation, that's why so many people are struggling today. Just a few decades ago, one income in the house was enough to buy a nice house, to have 2 cars, to send your children off to college and live successfully. Today, you're lucky if you can make it on 3 or 4 incomes and not living in the lap of luxury, just being able to pay your bills. And it's because of that devaluation of the dollar, among other things. April Mama, thank you for that good news. Arizona starting to prosecute landlords for collusion and the price fixing causing homelessness. By the way, there is, for anyone who has not heard this, there has been a relatively recent change in the housing market in that before 10 years ago, it was primarily individuals who were landlords and property owners. But mega corporations decided to get in on the housing market, and now they own massive amounts of houses. And because they own such a large percentage of the housing market, a house that you could have bought for $120,000 is $250,000 or $300,000, and rent has went from $600 a month to like $2,500 a month. Because if they own enough property in a certain area, they can charge whatever they want to, and you don't have a choice but to pay it. And people have caught on to that, by the way. Most homeless in California are veterans. That is just absurd. Hello, Brandy. Good to see you, my friend. Yes, Anna, I didn't want to mention any names, but I'm glad that you did. Just like the Depression. Every single correction in the stock market, money doesn't ever disappear. That's just not the way the system is designed. It goes somewhere. It goes somewhere. And that has happened at an alarming rate in the last 10 years. The last 20 years, really. But anytime that there's any big, huge shift where the common people lose a lot of money, it tends to float up to the very tippy top. The banks had no money. Yeah, garbage. Absolute garbage. I want to share, this has taken a huge detour from the topic I originally wanted to discuss. But in case anybody out there is not aware of this, this is important information as well. Our banking system in the United States is a fractional reserve banking system. And in truth, you don't even have to call it fractional reserve anymore. If you're not real big on banking or financial lingo, what that basically means is if, let's say I give you $100 and you decide, cool, I'm going to go put this $100 in my bank account and then I'm going to use it to go buy a whatever. What, I can't even think of anything now. So you're going to go buy a bicycle at Walmart. You'd need more money than that. But, okay. So you take that $100, you go deposit it into your bank, and that money's floating there in the bank. So the bank says, okay, I've got $100 here. By law, I'm able to only keep 10% of that. So they're going to keep $10, and then they can loan out the $90. Loan it out. And then what happens when they loan it out? Well, they're loaning it to somebody who wanted to buy something. So what do? They go and they put the money in the bank so they can make the purchase. The bank says, cool, you gave me $90. By law, I'm only required to keep 10% of that. So I'm going to keep 10% and then loan out the other 90%. And then it's a continual circle over and over and over again. So that the vast majority of money that exists in the United States that is owed to people doesn't even exist as worthless paper dollars. It's digits floating around in the internet. Digits on a computer screen. That's a very scary notion to consider. And they've actually changed the rules and the laws on that to where they're not even required to keep that 10% fractional reserve anymore. That's why banks got into trouble in 2007 and 2008, because they loaned out way, way more than what they had. And then that wasn't even theirs to loan out, right? They're given the magical ability to just go click, click, click and say, yeah, here you go. We're going to transfer some digits through the internet from my computer, from their computer over to my computer, and then I'll transfer it into your account. That money's not actually there. It's just digits floating around in the atmosphere. Wistful, I don't trust your numbers. Good. I sincerely hope that you go do research on your own and come to your own conclusion. There was a time whenever I was going to mention something like this, I would go and I would get the reports. I would go and get the actual numbers, the citations from the studies and all of that. But I don't do that anymore. And there's a reason for that. It's because I don't want to become an authority figure. I have no desire for that. I don't want to be the guy that somebody comes to and says, what he says is the truth. I'm going to listen to it, and I don't need to think about it or form my own conclusion. I don't have any desire for that. I want to spark people and trigger people into going and doing their own digging and finding their own numbers. I don't even know what you're referring to. I'm assuming the housing market collapse in 2008. But I think you might be surprised if you look into that. I think it's like 85% in single family rentals. I know it's ridiculously high. I don't remember exactly what the percentage is on that. Yeah, they do want 15-minute cities. That's not a conspiracy. It's published in the public domain. They've declared that. It is my honor, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that, my friend. They take 100 of our money and loan it out all at once. Exactly. And then what happens with the $100 they loan out? It's just a vicious cycle. It keeps repeating and keeps repeating. And the truth is, there's hardly any money out there. And here's the thing. Our money holds no value. If you think that you can avoid catastrophe such as a market crash by having $100,000 stuffed in cash under your mattress, that won't help, because it is a debtor's note, meaning it holds no monetary value. It is not backed by gold or any other tangible asset. It's what's known as a fiat currency, which means fake. It does not have actual value. The only value of the US dollar is what the perceived value of it is. Once we moved away from the gold standard, that's when everything changed. And that's why we got into bed with certain Middle Eastern countries, and it became known as the U.S. petrodollar. But there is a massive push for numerous countries right now ditching the dollar, saying that we are no longer going to trade in U.S. dollars, specifically for oil. And that is absolutely huge. I cannot tell you how big of a deal that is for U.S. citizens. We might not know for a while the true implications of that, but it's not a good thing at all, because we used to have the perception of value. Because let's say if you live in China, let's say you've got a shipping company and you need 100,000 barrels of crude oil to power your ships. You can't just go to Saudi Arabia and say, hey, I'd like 100,000 barrels of oil and here's my yen. You have to first trade that currency into US dollars and then buy the crude oil with US dollars. There is the value. The oil sets the value of the US dollar. But now that numerous countries have said, no, we're not going to do that anymore, that changes everything to where there's no actual tangible asset or resources at all. No commodities attached to the paper that we call the US dollar. I thought it was screwy mortgages. Nina, that was a huge part of it. There was predatory lending practices. There was a whole lot that went into that. But it was because our banking system is essentially a pyramid scheme. If you look at it from a bird's eye view, that's what our banking system is. It's a giant pyramid scheme. But they were also lending money, insane amounts of money, to people who had no business borrowing money, with terrible credit scores. In some cases, people who didn't even have a job or no income. There are some cases where people filled out a mortgage application for their pet and were approved for a mortgage loan. That's the kind of thing that led to that crash. There was a whole lot going on in there. And the bankers got rich. They got bailed out. I'm sorry to hear that, Happy Hippo. There's a lot of people that were in that same boat. Yeah, the election notice left. They're going to have to pop up one for monetary policy with the World Economic Forum or something now. Roadkill Redneck, I love that. Put not your trust in man, but only God shall you trust. Get approached several times every week to sell my house. You must live in an area where they're really wanting to push up property values, would be my guess. I will say this, in the last, I think, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now, BlackRock has started selling properties at an alarming rate, even at a loss. Even when they're losing money, they've just started unloading property. And that tells me that they see something big coming, or they're trying to orchestrate something big coming. But either way, that might be something to look into. Yep, the BRICS nations, exactly. Even bigger than the BRICS nations is Saudi Arabia, saying we are considering dropping the US dollar as the official reserve currency. That was a really underhanded way of saying this is what's going to happen. They're not considering anything. That's just what's coming. Hello, Tanya Lynn. This will turn out to be a good thing in the end. That's one thing to keep in mind. I know when we get on topics like this, I know it sounds like we're on this downward negative spiral. But again, these are the birthing pains of the birthing of the new age, the age of Aquarius. For anybody who doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about, let me know. But I know most of you guys, you hear me say this all the time. And it might seem like things are getting drastically worse, But I think in truth, light is being shed on the darkness, and we're seeing for the first time perhaps how bad things really have been. That's not to say that things aren't getting worse, because the birthing pains are speeding up. The contractions are getting closer together and more painful. But at the same time, in the age of Aquarius, the waters being poured out on the land is the waters of truth. And the truth will no longer remain hidden, and it's coming to light. And we're seeing for the first time many things that we've been blinded to in the past that has been kept hidden from us. And it's a little overwhelming, right? So I don't consider these to be bad things at all. They are bad things, but it's not a bad thing for them to come to light. We're just raising our awareness of them. And that's the first step to change, is being aware that there is a problem. Once we're aware there's a problem, and then we acknowledge it, then we can make a change, right? And I think that's ultimately a good thing, because I don't think any of this garbage that we've been discussing tonight has any place in the age of Aquarius. Like loads for deposits. This is why we start wars. Yeah. Yeah. A whole lot more than what people realize, I think. Yeah, Star Muse, exactly. That's the crazy thing about credit scores, is if you handle your money so successfully that you refuse to take on any debt, if you want a car and you work hard and you save up your money until you have enough cash to go and buy that car, you have the most horrific credit score you could possibly imagine, because you are financially responsible. The higher your credit score is, the more they see this person is capable of juggling a lot of debt. So let's unload a bunch of debt on that person. That's all a high credit score means. Nina, you said who? I'm not sure. I'm sure that you're asking me a question about who, not saying the WHO. Keith, I was hoping that question would not come up. Let me get to the bottom of my comments real quick. Yes, I do think we're in another housing bubble, but in truth, it's much more than a housing bubble. Through the quantitative easing that has happened for decades, and through the artificial manipulation of our financial system and our economy, our entire economy should have collapsed in 2008, but it didn't. Because what did we do? We printed trillions of dollars into existence and flooded the economy and all of these new dollars. And what happens whenever a bunch of people get money? They spend it, right? So a bunch of goods and services are bought more so than what normally would be, and it makes it look like we're having an economic recovery. But in truth, it's like you got a little bit of oil in a jar, and you pour a bunch of water into it. All it does is dilute that, and so it's weaker. And that's what happened to the US dollar. It's much, much weaker because of these trillions of dollars that's been pumped into the economy. They did that to avoid a complete economic collapse, but that just means that bubble is gigantic now. So once it does bust, it's gonna bust big. They've still got plenty of tricks up their sleeve to continue to artificially manipulate the economy and the financial system. But ultimately, I think that, again, it's all part of this system that will be changing in a big way. And I heard about that bill. I didn't know that it passed. I personally think that mega corporations have no business buying single family homes. They're for single families, not for corporations. Thank you for that, Miracles from Heaven. I appreciate you. Yes, Deborah, you are allowed to. You can buy currency in any country that you want to, as far as I know. Arlena, I don't want to repeat your comment out loud, but you might be onto something. Solutions are definitely possible. Absolutely. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to bring about that change, right? That's why we're here, to bring into existence the age of Aquarius. But again, I do think this process of the truth coming to light, albeit painful, it's necessary for us to actually evolve and change. You cannot correct a situation if you're not aware of it. No, I agree with you. You can keep a high credit score without the debt, such as getting multiple credit cards, purchasing stuff on them, and then paying them off, and not allowing the interest to spiral out of control. You will eventually get a really high credit score. But ultimately, what I'm saying is what that's telling creditors is that you have the capacity to juggle a lot of debt. I'm not saying that means you do have a lot of debt. They see that as the capacity for you to handle a lot of debt. Nina, that is, you ask who is BlackRock? That is a huge topic. Far too big for me to go into right now. But I will say it is a gigantic, massive conglomerate of a corporation that owns almost everything. Almost everything. They've got their tentacles in everything. From media corporations to the music industry to Hollywood to major pharmaceutical companies, weapons manufacturing, all sorts of stuff. On paper, at first, it don't look like it because they own these things through subsidiaries and through all kinds of like under the table kind of deals. But they own an awful lot of stuff. It's just a giant corporation. Mobs didn't use credit for home loans or cars and has zero credit. Roadkill Redneck, I agree 100%. Like any pyramid scheme, we need more nations on the bottom. Anna, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that. How does one buy a piece of ocean land? Amanda Knight, thank you for that, my friend. I appreciate you. What's interesting is that the credit rating means almost nothing outside of the U.S. It means something completely different in certain countries. Like if you were to go to China, as an example, they have the social credit system, which is a very terrifying thing. And that is being piloted here in the United States now. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Yeah. They practically own everything. Okay, somebody asked a question earlier, and I did not answer it. I was going to get to the bottom of my comments first, and I got too distracted. Amanda, if I was in China right now having this conversation, I probably would have already had a black bag placed over my head and yanked out of the door. Thank you for the crowns, my friend. I appreciate that. Thank you for that support. But yeah, on a social credit system, for anybody who does not know what that is, it really has nothing to do with your credit worthiness, with your ability to juggle debt. Basically what it is a system that is designed to measure how well you follow the rules, how well you toe the party line, how often you think critically, and question authority. As an example, in China, if you jaywalk, if you walk across the street when you're not supposed to or in a place you're not supposed to, there's cameras everywhere with facial recognition, artificial intelligence software that sees it and then files a report and automatically deducts points from your score. In certain cases, let's say you speak out against the Communist Party in China, they can freeze your assets immediately, and that's probably the bare minimum of what they would do. But basically everything. They scour your social media, the things you watch on television, the pages on the website that you go to, the speeches you attend, the conversations that you have, how well you obey the rules. Are you accurately representing the Communist Party in China whenever you speak publicly or on your social media posts? All of those things factor into your social credit score. And if they don't like the way that you are behaving or the way that you're acting, then you get a very bad and negative score. And if it gets bad enough, not only do you lose access to your bank account, you can be fired. You don't have the ability to purchase anything anywhere, and you're not even allowed to use the transportation systems in the city in which you live. And if I'm not mistaken, you can actually be imprisoned for a low enough credit score. Yeah, I'd be done. I'd be done for sure. The hot uniform guys. 57,000 single-family homes owned by BlackRock. Good Lord. Yeah, and they have access to your bank account. But the bad thing is, I mean, good thing for us, we don't live in China. The bad thing is this is being piloted in other countries and in the United States. There are places where they're piloting this. And if you read the declaration on the World Economic Forum, as an example, they have declared their official plan for humanity, which involves the smart cities, the 15-minute cities, and social credit scoring systems with a digital ID. And I know that this is tinfoil hat conspiracy, right? But so many things have been that are now absolute proven fact. And besides, this is published on the public domain by the World Economic Forum and other big, what's the term for them? I call them alphabet corporations, but they're multi-government global entities such as the World Economic Forum, the WHO, the United Nations, and several others. But they published this plan, and that's a key part of it. Yes, they are both vying for control. They've got a lot of clout. And they're heavily involved in politics. They are big supporters of politicians, and I think it is incredibly naive of we the people to think that a mega corporation that can drop $10 billion and not even notice it on their books, making massive donations to politicians, will have absolutely no bearing whatsoever on their policy or the laws that they uphold or enact. I just think that's incredibly naive. Sounds like you're describing the new America. I seriously hope not, my friend. TJ says, Japan, if an elder person looks startled while walking and you pass them in a car, you can get a ticket. Wow. That's insane. I had not heard that one. I believe it. I do believe it, though. Exactly. You'll own nothing and you'll like it. That was the official motto. By the way, if you guys, if you're interested in learning more information about this, there is a book out there that was written by an exemplary human being named Klaus Schwab. If you guys have not, if you're not familiar with him, I would strongly encourage you to look him up and buy his book, because he needs everybody's support. But his book is about the vision for the future of humanity, and the elite are all on board with this plan. And I mean, it's published, it's documented. This is their plan. They're saying to the world, this is what they want to do. So it's probably a good idea to be aware of that. I could take the community, but not the socially responsible credit score thing. Yeah, exactly. That is an important point. And inevitably, I will probably lose some people whenever I say this, but the truth is the truth. The world has never seen true communism. Okay, there's a far cry between actual communism and what has been pushed onto populations under the guise of communism. True communism means community. It means the banding together of all people embracing equality, and that my vote means the exact same thing as Bill Gates' vote, right? That's what true communism looks like. But we've never seen that. That's not what happened in Soviet Russia. That's not what happened in Korea or Vietnam or in China. That is not communism. That is something entirely different, masquerading in the disguise of communism. But that, to me, should be expected. I mean, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Tony, personally, to me, at this point, if you're not entertaining any conspiracy theories, I think you're not thinking critically. That term, by the way, came from the United States government to discredit critical thinkers. That's where the term conspiracy theorist originated from. And now, because of the propaganda and the brainwashing, whenever the mainstream utters the word conspiracy theory, it is just almost immediately dismissed by droves of people. They hear that and they equate that with meaning it's Looney Tunes. It's nonsensical. There's no truth to it whatsoever. It's an appeal to authority, and it's meant to trigger that response within us that it's based on lies. It's deceitful. It's manipulation. There's no truth in that. But in truth, more often than not, that term is used to discredit critical thinkers. I'm not saying that there's not a bunch of crazy conspiracy theories out there, because there are. We're drowning in them. And again, that's one of my biggest problems with the ease and spread of information that we have, is because anybody can publish anything. Right? And that's why, we have a large percentage of the population believing in all kinds of things that just are not reality. And if you muddy the waters enough, throw enough misinformation, enough garbage and stuff in there, the truth becomes indecipherable using logic. And you have to engage those inductive reasonings, such as your intuition and spiritual discernment. Cheryl, I can type into the chat. What we call communism is actually authoritarianism. Yes. Oh, thank you for that heads up, Suzanne. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'll have to check on the website. Exactly, Roseanne. Just like we're not a democracy, most people do not know that. So I applaud you, my friend. Most people, because we're told that we live in a democracy, and no, we don't. If we lived in a democracy, we would all vote on the issues equally, and what the majority wanted is what we would have. But that's not the case. We live in a republic. Which is why we have, the popularity contest that we have to elect people to represent us. Funny how most of them turn out to be true. It is. Yeah, Arlene, I agree with you. Communism, the concept is not a new thing. And the political landscape, whenever that philosophy was first espoused in Western society, it was considered to be a new thing, but it's not. It's actually, it's an ancient philosophy, and many, especially tribal societies operated and under systems that were very similar to what true communism would be, with true equitable values, where, as an example, Native American cultures, the vast majority of them believed all life was sacred and holy. And their name for God was the spirit that moves in all things, right? Not, I mean more than you, or I'm worth more than you because I've got a Lamborghini. It was, my life is equal to everyone and everything. And that's how society functioned in a lot of those tribal societies. So, socialism is a completely different beast than communism. The killing fields. That sounds really... Why does that sound so familiar? I'll have to watch that again. Cheryl, I think it's filtering out some of your comments. I'm reading your comments, Cheryl, but it's not... it's like I'm missing pieces of it. I did an investigation on it. Not sure of the spelling. The Republic. Kamala was here to save democracy. I don't even want to touch that with a 50-yard stick. I'd call the U.S. an oligarchy hiding behind the facade of a democratic republic. I'd say that's fairly accurate. Cambodia after Vietnam fell. Klaus Schwab. Oh, is that what you're talking about? Oh, what a... I cannot remember the title of that book. It's actually... I believe it's got, part of the title is a date. I think it's 2025, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, let me just use the internet because I'll be scanning my shelves for too long. And bear with me. Yeah, I should have remembered the title of that. I'm going to type it. Yes, Arlena, you are correct. I I'm not going to type it. I just realized what the title is. I'll get my live shut down. I cannot type that. It is called Something Very Familiar 19, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab. But yes, that book, which by the way was published and came out before the pandemic started, was all about how this pandemic would be used as a springboard to enact global-wide control and societal change, and how if certain world leaders acted appropriately, we could harness this opportunity and be able to enact a great reset and be able to basically distill power and control to further cement that in the hands of the world elite. It's a really disgusting book. I don't know that I recommend reading it other than it's important information. It is right on the money. It's absolutely terrifying. And he was the founder of the World Economic Forum. That's probably, if you know about the World Economic Forum, that's probably all you need to know. Klaus Schwab. I'll type that part. I don't want to type the name of the book because it will probably get me shut down. Okay. You're very welcome, my friend. Yeah, Arlena, there's a reason for that. Your spiritual discernment is on point with that. He, in my humble opinion, is a very dark member of our species, if he's that. I'm not entirely sure that is what he is, but I think he makes Bill Gates look like an exemplary citizen. I'll say that. Oh, you're welcome, Cheryl. I just misunderstood what you were asking me earlier, I guess.